This time on Poll Hub, our brand new poll with NPR and the PBS NewsHour has a bunch of interesting findings, including some that many may find surprising. We're going to dig into all the data. Then there's been a lot of attention paid to the declining role of religion in the U.S. And we're looking at that, but we're also looking at this. Religion plays an important role in how we poll. So we're going to discuss that. And we end with the thing that puts Homer Simpson into a trance. What is it? What is it? What is it? Can't wait for that one. Stick around. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Maren Griffith.
I'm Athen Hollis.
And I am Lee Marinkoff.
So we have a brand new poll with NPR and PBS NewsHour, our partners, and a lot of interesting data in here, national poll, including obviously Trump and Biden. There's always a lot of interest in that and where they stand at any given point in time. Before we get to any of the other numbers, though, I do want to just raise one thing that is really struck me as newsworthy, and we can talk about it now or we can talk about it later, and that is we asked people if they thought that Joe Biden in a second term or Donald Trump in another term would strengthen our democracy, weaken our democracy, or not make any difference. And 46% said Joe Biden will weaken our democracy, and 48%, these are adults, national adults, said Donald Trump would weaken our democracy. Basically the same. And I think a lot of people might be surprised by that because of the track record they have in terms of the democracy and, the January 6th and all of that, and the statements they've made. They are very different people with regards to this. Is this simply how people define the question, Barb? Is that what we're getting at here? Is that what's happening?
Well, I found it absolutely fascinating too, and I'm going to add one too in a sec. But we think about the fact that we are coming to this election, we view our politics in different ways. I just think that this question just illustrates this in the most basic way. We all talk about the need to strengthen democracy. One of the questions we do ask is, whether people feel democracy is at risk. And we have an incredible consensus nationally about the fact that our democracy is at risk. But clearly, people think that the solution to that is very different. The other thing I thought was fascinating, even in that question, was 30% of Americans believe that Joe Biden would strengthen the democracy in a second term, but 37% said that Trump would. And so I think these are two candidates that are incredibly similar. They're incredibly polarized. And I know people are saying, well, this isn't a redo. And that's true. It's not a redo, but this is an incredibly competitive contest with two candidates that are disliked by the majority of Americans. And I think are struggling to find that 50% marker, barring, one of the third-party candidates, doing well.
I would throw a little bit into this as well. Joe Biden is making this a huge issue in his advertising, in everything he says, what his supporters are saying. Democrats are more likely to see democracy as a problem, whereas Republican voters are more likely to see things like immigration and inflation. Despite Biden outspending Trump by a zillion to one, this is not having an impact on moving people in one way or another on that question. I find also on that, when you look at Democrats, 8% say Biden will weaken the democracy. Republicans, 8%, same number, think he will weaken it. And if you add up
You mean Trump? Trump will weaken.
Trump, yeah. So they both are losing the same amount of their base, identical figures. And if you add up the strength in the economy with kind of like a no different status quo, which is kind of like a way of kind of combining it, Biden, 92% of those combinations, Trump, 91%. So when you make the point that these people have kind of like similar kind of numbers, maybe very different by party, but the total is very much the same. And I find that really telling, given, that one guy is talking about democracy and the other guy's in a courtroom every day.
So is this just a mobilizing issue for Democrats?
Right now,
Yeah,
Lee,
that's
fair to say.
Yeah, that's my question to you, Lee, I don't think that I'm going out on a limb here and saying that how do you define that Donald Trump does a better job of protecting democracy? How do his supporters, how are they saying that you do a better job of protecting democracy? He wants to be a dictator on day one. I'm not making a value judgment on that. I'm just saying just the facts on the ground. isn't that's why I asked the question the way I asked it? Is
Yeah,
it just
no,
that people
this
are
is very-
answering are they answering a question that we've crafted to get at some facts, and they're answering it in just a truly partisan way? Is that all this is?
Well, I don't know about that because, there is the no difference choice. So even if you think the world of Donald Trump, you don't necessarily think that that's going to be the difference that he's going to be making. I think if we looked, instead of saying democracy, or we said economy, or we said foreign policy, I think we might see some very different answers
Right.
along those lines, which we have. But we asked a couple other questions in this survey. First, we asked what Americans were most concerned about, and we kind of gave some broader value choices on this, whether they're worried about the rise of fascism and extremism, worried about a lack of values, whether they're concerned that the U.S. is weak globally, whether they worry about less opportunity and wealth. And I think that what's really interesting and speaks to this is that Democrats are more than 3 times as likely than Republicans to be concerned about an increase in fascism and extremism. So that may be how they're defining democracy. Republicans, on the other hand, talk about and cite a lack of values. 36% said a lack of values, and another 30% said becoming a weak nation globally. So when you ask about the validity of the question, which in statistical terms, does it actually measure what we think it's measuring? I think it is. I think it is a very different definition of democracy. I think one, on the Democrat side, I think there's a feeling that our rules, our constitution, our democratic way of life is under threat. And I think for Republicans, they also believe it's under threat, but from a different view, from the fact that we don't have the same values that we may have had in the past, and that they don't feel that President Biden is as strong globally as he should be.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to suggest that we asked a question, didn't get the answer, that we were trying to get at. I think what you said is what I was trying to say, and I said it inartfully, which is, how do you define defending democracy? And the definition from the Republicans or the folks supporting Donald Trump, I guess, is it's difficult for me to understand that. And that does explain it, is that it's a value thing, which is, if you replace the word democracy with country, then I get it. I just think I'm very literal about what democracy means. I don't know, Leah. I'm probably crazy.
No. I think no. I think this is a very useful discussion about digging into what the poll is. And so I'm going to pivot in the last couple of minutes here on this and do what I take us away from a serious discussion about democracy and talk about approval ratings in the toss-up question. So, there I am, guilty as charged. I think there's a couple things in this poll that I think bear watching down the road. And one is, although Joe Biden's approval rating is at 41%, among those who say they're definitely going to vote, it's 46%. We see that also in the toss-up numbers. The type of people that Joe Biden is attracting in this very close race tend to be the higher intensity voters as opposed to the lower intensity voters. So Donald Trump is going to have to get more support out of a shrinking group, whereas Joe Biden needs to increase the turnout among those who are more likely to anyway. That was one thing. And the other thing I wanted to point out was, when you look at a multi-candidate field, and there's a lot of talk about, what effect these folks might have, the Robert Kennedys, the Cornel Wests, the Jill Steins. And Robert Kennedy, although the conventional wisdom was that he would pull more from Biden than Trump, they're pulling about the same. The multi-candidate numbers are different because Joe Biden loses more to Cornel West and Jill Stein than Donald Trump does. So when you look at the multi-candidate fields, yes, the added candidates at this point, and we're not looking state by state, this is a national numbers, obviously. Right now, the Robert Kennedy numbers don't seem to be playing out the way people expected, but the other numbers for West and Stein seem to be something that might be important on November 5th. Is November 5th election day, or am I making that up?
I'd have to look on a calendar. I don't know.
Well,
it's the first Tuesday in November. How about that?
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, stay away from the numbers, Lee. Well, I'd like to welcome in our student producer of this podcast, Athen Hollis. She has some numbers for us on a different topic. and quite an interesting find. Hi, Athen.
Hi. Yes. So today we're going to be talking about religion. Is the United States, are we losing our religion?
Yeah, well, I guess this podcast is not like Mom and Dad told us to do at Thanksgiving, which is don't talk about politics or religion. So why don't you start us off?
Well, so let's start with the basics. So who is religious? Well, Americans are still largely religious, but their participation in religion is declining. And those who don't believe in any religion are also growing.
Well, yeah, most people are still religious. A Gallup polling from 2023 shows around 3 in 4 Americans still do identify with a specific religious faith.
And the largest population is those who identify with a Christian religion at 68%. But again, that number is declining. This number is down from 77% in 2010 and 86% in 2000.
On the flip side, 22% of Americans report that they don't have any kind of religious preference. And that number has risen from 14% in 2010 and single digits, 8% in 2000, almost a quarter of a century ago.
And this just makes me wonder, why is this group increasing? What is making people become unaffiliated? And is this issue as simple as not believing?
Well, that's a really good point, Athen. And there has been a good amount of research on this as well. PRRI, they do study religion in the United States. Their polling has shown that 67% of people who are religiously unaffiliated became so because they stopped believing in their religion's teaching. And I know you found some other data as well on particular issues that have been in the public debate of late.
Yeah, there are some other strong reasons for leaving. In 2023, 47% said they left the religion due to negative teaching or treatment of the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah, and I think almost another third, 3 in 10, said their choice to leave was due to the sexual abuse scandals that we have heard so much about.
So what we're seeing is a plurality of Americans are still religious, but for how long? It looks like among those who are religious, they are participating in their religion a lot less.
And 45% of Americans say religion is still very important in their life. 26% say it's fairly important. And 28% say it's not very important at all. So actually, the majority is, on the side of religion not being essential to their lives.
And this question has been asked for a while. Gallup first asked the question of how important religion is back in 1965. And back then, 70% said religion was very important to them. We can see this is a big jump from today.
Yeah, and importance of religion has certainly dipped among Americans. And not only that, church attendance and church membership has declined as well. So the idea of people being connected to these religious institutions has declined, as we've seen many other institutions decline as well.
Yeah, we're seeing 32% in 2023 said they had gone to church, synagogue, mosque, or temple in the past 7 days, whether that be in person or virtually. And in 2000, 44% said the same. And in 1958, 49% had said the same.
Yeah, and that's interesting because because you say, in person or virtually, Athen, and we do have so many other ways of connecting. And it seems that actually there's also been a decline in the number of Americans that belong to a formal house of worship. Less than half of Americans, 45%, say that they belong to a particular parish or religious house of worship.
Yeah, so overall, we're seeing religion is on the decline. People are becoming less religious. And even those who are religious, they're attending services, masses, sermons, and they're just overall practicing their religion less.
Yeah, I know you've studied this in your classes too. In sociology, the term third place, which refers to kind of a social surrounding that's separate from our two usual social environments of home and workplace. And, I think one of the questions that we will discuss a little bit more as we bring in Mary Griffith is, as places like churches, they used to be, third places, what are people doing without them? And what, if anything, is taking the place of that kind of religious connection? Not a real nice, easy question for you, Mary.
Yeah,
Welcome.
and I'm no expert by any means, but when the discussion that you've been having is really fascinating. And I think a couple of points that you brought up really play into that question more, which is the distinction between being religious and practicing a religious faith. And when we look at that distinction, data about faith in institutions really has an impact. So according to Pew in a 2023 survey, um, Americans had either a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in church or organized religion. And that was 32% who felt that way. And so is it really a question of the institution versus believing in the key elements to a faith? Not necessarily the teachings, but the key elements like love and acceptance. And so it comes back to this idea, is there a sense of a bit of hypocrisy rather in terms of how people are viewing the institution that is leading worship. And so, the idea that the clergy sex scandal was brought up and the treatment of the LGBTQ community. And I think because of this perhaps perceived hypocrisy, people aren't really gravitating toward the institution. But, does it come back to what someone very close to me once said is, it comes back to the Beatles, which is all you need is love. And so are people now finding not necessarily a physical space to gather formally, but is it really this more to the idea of coming together as a community with people of like minds and like beliefs? And so I'm not necessarily sure that answers the question of the third space, but I think it does speak to perhaps where Americans, are kind of coalescing on this issue.
We had done some polling about a decade and a half ago, and, seeing this kind of change and decline. And one of the things that I think was particularly interesting at that time is, which speaks to your point, Mary, of it being a disconnection from the institutions rather than the spirituality. Because what we found was, younger folks, people under 45, particularly millennials, who were the generation, back a decade ago, they were just about to make their mark on things, but they very much identified themselves as spiritual people, but not necessarily as religious people. And so I think that has been a change as well. And perhaps, as pollsters, we may want to be distinguishing that a little bit more between the idea of whether you identify with a religious institution or whether you have a belief in a higher being and are more spiritual. Because certainly when we look at politics, there's a significant distinction, not only demographically, but also behaviorally between people who say that they do identify or affiliate themselves with a religion and those who practice that religion. And across the board, and regardless of religion, we generally see people who practice a religion to be somewhat more conservative than people who don't. And so there's a lot about religion that we look at in polling besides just this issue of trust.
I'm wondering, Barb, if you can dive in a little bit into how we at the poll touch on religion in our polling and how you think this issue might affect that.
Yeah, it is interesting because what we do look at mostly is, one, if a person is affiliated or, believe that they are connected to a religion. And we're kind of using that almost like we do party identification, which is kind of weird. And so it's kind of the statistical side of understanding religion rather than the religiosity part. But we kind of put it on a continuum from those who aren't affiliated with a faith to those who are. And then on the other side are those who actually practice that faith. Now, Gallup has a very stringent way of identifying or defining whether you practice a religion. And they see it as people who connect at least once a week. We're a little bit more broader because we find that there isn't that much of a difference politically between people who may go every week to a service or who go at least once or twice a month to a service. And so in that sense, we do see a very different political perception, positions on issues, people generally who do practice a religion, and the more they do practice that religion, tend to focus more on values to line up more with the Republican Party rather than the Democrat Party. And they tend to be more conservative on a number of issues, particularly social issues. So we look at that as always part of our polls, and it's something that we do track, especially when we are thinking about who's going to turn out in an election, because people who practice a religion are also likely to be more connected to institutions and have a greater likelihood of voting as well.
The gang's all here for fun fact talk. If you don't like politics and you don't like religion, maybe you do like donuts. Okay. Jade challenged me on the segue here, so I think I got there. Okay.
That
so
was
we have
beautiful. You
Thank
nailed
you very
it.
much. Thank you. Or I could say we dipped into it, dunked into it. I don't know what it is. Anyway, 2021, Ipsos did a study, a national study or national question. They asked about what your favorite kind of donut is. And this has almost everybody weighing in. Cream-filled was number 1. Plain glazed was number 2. Chocolate glazed number 3. Although don't eat donuts was there between second and third. And then you go down to some of the old-fashioned jelly-filled, topped with sprinkles, which can go with others, I might add. So that 4%, I think, is a little bit misleading, because that's probably a more popular choice. Anyway, we're going to bring in the first shot at the microphone. I think it is Hunter. Hunter, welcome. You're being promoted today.
Thank you, Wade.
What is your kind of donut preference?
I got to be honest. I will be happy if you put any type of donut in front of me. You will see a big smile come across my face, but my go-to has got to be jelly filled.
Okay.
Wow. Interesting. Wow, you're hardcore.
Yeah.
I'm very serious.
I would, except when you bite into a jelly-filled donut, you get the powder all over your shirt or tie or whatever. So we're going to go to Mary. Not only your donuts, but I'd like to know your kids' preference at this point.
I'm sort of with Hunter. Put a donut in front of me and I'll be happy. I like Boston cream, so cream filled. And jelly is a close second. Growing up, I liked the sprinkles. So that sort of plays to what my children like. The Boston cream filled, and jelly are tops. Although Gigi, who I don't think I've talked much about on the podcast, she likes the strawberry sprinkle covered donuts.
Wow.
And she doesn't really eat the donut. She just licks the sprinkles and the frosting off. So.
Wow. So we have a whole new category. Jay, what do you dunk?
Okay, so I'm on the team donut, all donuts. I don't like cream filled so much. I like all the other ones. I wonder who the 15% are that don't eat donuts are. I don't think they exist. I think this poll somehow is skewed, because I don't believe that 15% of the people in America don't eat donuts. And if they do, who are they? Who are these people?
Well, they're the silent donut eaters. I finally found a silent group.
Here comes Barb.
Hang on. I wouldn't say I don't eat donuts, because I truly like anything that is sweet. But donuts really are not my go-to snack. And actually all that kind of cream, frosting, jelly, sweet stuff, yes. So if I were to...
This is incredible. You have the biggest sweet tooth, I think, of almost anybody I've met.
Yes.
And donuts is the thing that breaks this.
Wow. Yeah, but
that was not on my card.
So if I were to choose a donut, what I really do like are apple cider donuts.
Oh.
And so in the fall, yes, it is. It is a seasonal thing. So in the fall, I mean, I actually equate the fall with the apple cider donuts, especially since I've lived in the Hudson Valley for a very long time, which is apple country. So all the farms have their special recipe for apple cider donuts. And that I cannot resist one coming hot out of the oven with some sugar sprinkled on top.
Okay, and we turn to Athen, who's not from the Hudson Valley. What do you like up in Maine when you're at home?
Lobster donuts, right? Lobster.
Oh God, I don't know about that.
Yummy.
You know what? I'm gonna have to
claw your way out of that one.
I'm going to have to double down on the jelly donut. I really like a jelly-filled donut.
Okay.
But also what I didn't see on here is like a butter crunch butternut donut. So I don't know if any of you have tried that, but it's like a chocolate donut with the little like crunchy parts on it. Those are really good.
Well, it's interesting. There are 6 of us here. So I'm actually pretty close to representing that 15%.
Well, yeah, but here you go. I have 2 categories, and we'll wrap it with this. One is chocolate glaze, which is what I actually prefer. And the other is I don't eat donuts, which is what I report if anybody says, did I get a donut on the way home or anything? Because you rarely see me eating a donut, but that doesn't mean I don't.
Donuts.
That'll do it for Poll Hut this week.
Yeah, turn it up.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Athen Hollis and Rebecca Hendricks.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review.
Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub.
And with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button. Click it and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.
I want to live in a town where it only takes a time to breathe.